Save It for the Blind is sponsored by Kershaw Knives. Kershaw manufactures next-level pocket knives for outdoor enthusiasts. Save It for the Blind is now also being sponsored by Roseville Motorsports. Roseville Motorsports is the greater Sacramento area's premier destination for all your power sports vehicle needs. Stop in today to browse off-road vehicles from leading manufacturers like Polaris, Yamaha, and more. If you guys are enjoying the show, we'd love to hear from you and get your support. Please follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Give us a 5-star rating. Your reviews really help us grow and reach more people. Thank you for being a part of our community. Yeah, maybe I should have. Maybe that's the ticket. Next time I will.
Are we back on recording?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're good to go. So I just want to welcome everybody back to another episode of Save for the Blind. Carson Odegard here, normal host, and this episode, Jeff, the other co-host, is actually going to be out. We have a guest co-host, Kevin Vella, CWA's land trust coordinator, as well as biologist. Kevin, if you want to introduce our guest for us, that would be great.
Yeah. Thanks, Carson. Today we have on Joe Slaton. Joe's a friend of mine. He's one of my turkey hunting mentors, I will say. I've asked him a lot of questions over the years, but I dealt a lot with Joe back in my National Wild Turkey Federation days. We got to know each other through his volunteering with the organization, and I also got to know Joe going back to Nashville every year because many times he has competed in the Grand National Calling Championship in the gobbling division, and his both 2015 and 2022 has taken home first place at the biggest stage in the world for gobbling, which is pretty dang cool. And there's been multiple years. I don't know how many, Joe, where you've also finished in the top 3, including this year here just last week in Nashville. Joe finished second in the Grand National Gobbling competition. So, Joe, welcome to Save It for the Blind podcast, and we're very excited to have you on.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and congrats on this weekend. That's
Thank you.
Big time. How long have you been competing for?
Oh, the first contest I was ever in was in 1986.
Oh, wow. So a while.
Yeah. First time I won a state championship was 1991, and then you had to win a state or an open contest to qualify to call at the Grand Nationals. And so then I started calling at the Grand Nationals and called in 92, 93, and 94. So.
Okay. So you're going to have to explain turkey calling contest for me, because I come from a duck calling background, and I know it is the same where in duck calling, you have to win a state or a state sanctioned event to make it to the nationals, or they call it the worlds. But there just seems to me, from what I've learned, there's so much more categories, I guess I would say, in turkey calling, with the differences where duck calling, you have live, you have your meat calling, your main street, and that's pretty much it. Now they have team competitions. But what is the turkey calling scene like competitively?
Well, they have several divisions, like you talked about. They have a Pulse division, juniors, intermediate, and then they have owl hooting, gobbling, they have friction, and then they have the senior open. And so each one of those divisions have their rules, and as far as, the age differences and all that kind of stuff for the kids. And then in the friction, all you can use is friction calls. And then they also have a 2-man team where they have friction and air operated calls. So one of the contestants, the team members, has to do 3 of them, and the other one has to do 3. And it doesn't matter which ones, but 3 have to be friction and 3 have to be air.
Yeah. Well, and how many of those have you competed in, Joe? I know you've done obviously the gobbling, and then also I know you've done the teams one. Have you ever done the owl hooting division?
Yes, I did.
That's
yes,
awesome.
I have. Because I make owl hooting well, so.
The gobbling thing, you're going to have to do it from. The gobbling thing's all just straight mouth vocalizations, no assistance via calls or mouthpieces.
Oh, he has a
You
reed.
can do whatever
Oh,
you
you
want.
you have a reed?
Yes, I use a mouth call
Do most people?
if they want to be up there on the top.
Huh. I had no clue. That's
Yeah.
pretty-
There's some different devices people use for a while, like it's called the Haint gobble call, and it kind of looked like a goose call type thing,
Yeah.
and they would gobble through it. But some people do natural voice gobbling, but it's just hard to compete against an actual mouth call to gobble
Yeah.
with.
What are the judges looking for, let's just say in the gobbling competition?
They want to hear a gobble. They
And
want to
just-
hear a good, Eastern gobble. That's what they want to hear.
Now, when you're putting your routine together, how much of it is pure gobbling? How much of it is, kind of the sequence of it? I know you typically do like a spit and drum in there too. How much of it is it the overall sequence versus just the clean gobble?
Well, some guys like to throw a little bit of yelping in. I do spit and drum a few times during the routine, but it's a gobble contest, so they want to hear the gobble. That's what they're judging you on. So the only problem is if you throw other things in there that doesn't really sound that great, you're going to get docked, and it's not going to help you or if you do, So
Huh.
that's gobble usually.
That's a good point. That's a good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's well, so let me ask you this. What is the benefit of throwing something else in there if you are in a gobbling only competition?
Some people want to make like it's a real scenario situation. A gobbler's answering a hen yelp or whatever, and they want to gobble to it. Some people will throw in some owl hooting and then gobble to it.
Mhm.
But again, if something ain't right in there, it can only hurt you. It can't help you.
Gotcha. So they're doing a scenario, where the bird responds back, but the judges are only judging on the gobble, but everything else beforehand could technically hurt you and not help you.
Correct.
Huh. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's crazy. And then I know, you've been up on that stage multiple times over the years. What are your nerves like? Are they still, are you still, shaking getting up there? How do you feel each time getting on that stage?
Cotton mouth and shaking like
Every time?
every time.
That's awesome. Hey, it means you're alive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I imagine that doesn't go away. Has it gotten any better over the years, or is it the same as the first time?
I think I was a little more nervous early on, because it was a big stage. Nobody knew who I was. I'm from California. The people in the back east, they're going to 4, 5, 6 turkey calling contests a year, before they even get to the Grand Nationals, where we haven't had a contest in California in, several years. I don't know how long.
Yeah.
But it's been a long time.
Yeah.
So I don't get any time. And I was telling some guys up there in Nashville that I have never competed in a gobbling contest that wasn't at the Grand National.
Oh, wow.
And they compete there was the weekend before the Grand Nationals, there was a gobbling contest. There was a turkey calling contest that had the gobbling contest in it, So,
yeah, that's crazy. It's what's crazy to think about. It's cool for us, obviously being in California, we don't have this giant, turkey culture that they do in the Southeast or even the Midwest or the Northeast. So it's cool for us to see, for someone that's a passionate turkey hunter, to see that representation of that CA next to someone's name in the Grand National. It's like, hey, they know what I'm talking about here. So it's been fun to watch you and your journey through that, and just to feel represented and know that, we got you. It's cool to see you up there, and we're proud every time that you can make it up there.
Well, thank you.
Is there anything that you have yet to achieve in your competition calling career that you'd like to? Because I know you've won the Grand National Gobbling Champion. Is there anything else, any other categories that you'd like to compete in and win?
I would like to compete in the friction contest again, because I think I can compete with some of the friction guys there. And my goal would be obviously to win it, but my goal would be to make the cut. There's been nobody come close to winning making a cut in either the Friction or the Senior Open in California.
Oh, interesting. Do they hold the Friction and the Senior Open in higher regards than they do the Gobbling? Or is it all relatively the same?
No, it's at way more higher regard.
Okay.
The Friction division. Yeah.
Interesting.
There was, I think, 48 Friction callers, and there was 50, I think, Senior Open callers, and there was 28 gobblers.
Was there anybody in the Friction and the Open from California?
No.
So you're a sole hope.
We haven't had anybody qualify because we haven't had any contests.
Oh,
and you
interesting.
Qualify to call. Yeah.
So what's the closest contest that we have to California nowadays where you could qualify?
Maybe Oregon.
Huh.
I haven't seen the last time that Oregon has had one. I don't know.
That's interesting.
Yeah, kind of going back, Joe. You said you competed. That your first competition was 1986. I've been fortunate enough to hear your kind of genesis story of, how you started with the mouth call, and there is a fantastic story about your first mouth call. Would you be willing to share that story? Because it's a good one.
Absolutely. So when I first started hunting, I started hunting in 1983. And I didn't know anything. I was a pheasant hunter, or a little bit of a duck hunter. And there was nobody to talk to because there was nobody around that turkey hunted. And so I was just on my own doing whatever. And so I didn't see anything. I was trying to deer hunt a turkey. It was pretty much what we were trying to do in 83. In 1984, I bought a box call and I started listening to some tapes and stuff. So I bought a mouth call with the box call, and I tried, and I couldn't even get a sound out of the mouth call. I mean, nothing would come out. I mean, it was just, I would try, I just couldn't get anything out of it. And so it was like opening weekend of the turkey season in 1984. My cousin and I had the box call with me. I left the mouth calls in the car because I couldn't make any sound out of them. So I was using a box call, and I ended up calling a turkey in. And I didn't know how to set up. I didn't know anything like that. I was in stuff so thick you couldn't even shot an elephant if it had showed up, So I never did get a shot at the turkey. But a little while after that, I saw a guy in camo. And so I just took off walking for the guy. I wanted to go talk to him because that was the first turkey hunter I'd ever seen, So I walked up to him and we started talking. Well, all of a sudden he reaches inside his mouth to take his mouth call out. And I just I don't remember anything after that as far as what we talked about. I just wanted to get back to my truck because I had my mouth call in backwards for 6 months.
Oh, jeez.
Make a sound out of it.
Oh, wow.
I put the mouth call in my mouth when I got in the truck, and instantly started making turkey sounds and started yelping.
Wow.
You would think somebody with brains would go, let's try something different. Let's flip it around, turn it upside down, let's whatever,
Well, now you're a Grand National Gobbling champion, Joe.
If it wasn't for the guy he ran into in the woods, it may have never happened.
Yeah, probably.
That's crazy. What was hunting California like back then? I mean,
I'd love to know.
Like you talked about, I mean, obviously there was very few turkeys around and very few turkey hunters. I mean, what was that scene like? You only had a few different places you could even go.
Yeah, most of the public land was around the lakes, that type of stuff. And I actually found a flock of turkeys on some property. I found out who owned the property and went and asked him if I could get permission. And he just so happened to be building a house. And I was, at the time, I was a heating and air conditioning guy. So I'm like, I can help you out, put some gutters on your house or do whatever, And so I did that, and he gave me permission to hunt his place. And so I had a place to turkey hunt. So there wasn't a lot of turkey hunters out there. Like I said, I never even seen one. And so you pretty much had the woods to yourself when you're out hunting.
And then you got to see that population grow and grow and grow until our peak in the early 2000s. I mean, that had to be pretty insane. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. About back in the mid 90s, we had tons of turkeys. They were dumb. They'd come in when you called. So that was the good old days.
Dumb turkeys, my favorite turkeys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are the good ones. At what point did you start branching out into other states to go pursue other turkeys and California turkeys?
In 1990, I met a guy by the name of Marvin Robbins, and he owned Timberline Turkey Calls. And I started using some of his calls because there was nobody around here that made calls. And everything you called on was store-bought call. And Dick Kirby of Quaker Boy was big at the time. And so that was what we used. I used a Quaker Boy call back then. Anyway, I met Marvin, and it was a turkey calling contest in Anderson, California, up by Redding.
Mm-hmm.
I tried his call, and it sounded better than my Quaker Boy call the very first time I put it in my mouth. But I would practice so much with the other one, I'm like, I didn't want to change anything at the time. So anyway, so I actually used his call the next year and won the state championship with it. And he invited me to go to New Mexico the following year to turkey hunt. And so that ever since 1992, we started hunting together, and we hunted every year, and we would try to go to different states.
So how many states now have you been to turkey hunt?
I've been to 33, and I've killed 31 states. I had 2 states that I didn't kill.
Wow. What states were those?
The 2 states was New York.
Oh.
I shot and missed a turkey in New York, and Minnesota.
Mm.
I shot and missed a turkey in Minnesota.
Oh, man. Bet you think about those. That's rough.
Yeah.
Well, just means you got an opportunity to go back then.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, that's incredible. Over 30 states. And that's been since, you said 1992?
Yeah. 92 was the first year we went to New Mexico. And then we went on a Grand Slam mission one year, 1995. So we flew into Alabama. We hunted in Alabama, drove the rental car, me and Marvin both, and we went to Florida, came back to Alabama for a day or two. Then we flew back home. I hunted here in California, and like at the beginning of May, middle of May, I went back to Arizona and hunted with Marvin. He lived in Arizona, and we killed turkeys in all 4 states.
That's awesome. Single season Grand Slam.
Almost a double. I didn't even know it. I didn't even realize I only had 1 Marion tag, but I killed 2 Florida turkeys, 2 Easterns in Alabama, 3 California turkeys, and we went to Arizona. When we went to Arizona, we hunted an Indian reservation in Arizona, and I only had 1 tag, and I killed 1 turkey. So I was 1 turkey from being a double Grand Slam 1 year.
And could you have bought a second tag?
I could have if I'd have known it at the beginning. But at that time, you can't. They sold out like right about the time the season started. So, yeah.
Is there a favorite subspecies that you like to chase over the others?
No, not really. They all have their own little. The biggest thing is where they live. Like in the Osceolas living in the swamps. That's just different, different than anything. Everything can poke you and bite you, and it standing in water while you're doing it. So, yeah, I got a funny story about that. One of the Florida hunts with Roland Martin. I was hunting with Roland Martin.
Oh, geez.
Because I was in the Grand National Gobbling Contest. And I think it was either 92 or 93. And he was the MC of the Gobbling Contest. And I ended up taking 3rd place. And so he said, I want to talk to you afterwards. And I'm like, oh, what does Roland want to talk to me about, And so afterwards he goes, hey, I'm going to be at the Delta. Do you know where the Delta is? I go, yeah, I live like 20 minutes away from the Delta. He goes, there's going to be a big bass tournament there during turkey season. I want to come turkey hunting. So I said, all right. And I had a friend who had a guide service and everything, because during the time he was going to be here, I was going to be out of town. So I helped him out getting a place to turkey hunt. And but anyway, hunting with him in Florida, he invited me to come to hunt in Florida. I was hunting in Florida, and I mean, he's driving this truck. The tires are the same height as me. They're like 6 foot tall, right? and he's bouncing all over the roads while we were driving at 4:00 in the morning. But anyway, we get to where we're going to go, and we're walking in the dark, pitch black dark. And all of a sudden, we come across this little water area. We were in like 2 inches of water. We come to this other area, and he goes, this is going to get a little deep. Well, I had some hip boots, and I was pulling the hip boots up as high as I could just so they wouldn't go over my hip boots, right? And made it across without getting wet. And sure enough, we get over there. I call a turkey, started gobbling. I called the turkey in. I killed the turkey. We were walking back to the truck, and we go over and meet with his buddy we had split up from his buddy who was there. And he was telling him where we were and everything. And his buddy turned to me and looked at me with big eyes, and he goes, "You crossed that deep part of the water right over there?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "There's a 12-foot gator that lives in that spot."
Jeez.
He didn't tell me that before we went in.
That's great. Well, you probably never would have crossed it then before.
Yeah.
Probably.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I've seen a lot of the videos of hunting that South Florida stuff with, Dave Owens and Mark Heffron and stuff with their big old swamp buggies going through there. It looks like quite an adventure.
Yep.
Do you ever deal when you're going out back east with like any snake run-ins?
Oh yeah, quite a few. Most of them have been in Florida.
Oh, really? Florida's out to get you.
I just keep walking, move around it.
Go quick, fast feet.
So I know you are the owner of Motherlode Turkey Calls. What point in your career did you think, well, maybe instead of blowing or using other people's calls, I should just make my own?
Back in 2005, I bought a hand jig to make mouth calls with from a guy I knew on Facebook. And I started making my own mouth calls in 2005. My buddy still has Timberline calls, and he actually had me start making a couple of the different mouth calls that he sold. And then he passed away in 2009. And so then 2010, I started Motherlode Turkey Calls. And I started making my own pot calls, box calls, mouth calls. I started making everything. So
yeah, you've got the whole gamut now. You're doing tube calls, trumpet calls, owl hooters.
What this is somebody who's newer to turkey hunting. What is a trumpet call?
Trumpet call. It's similar to a wing bone,
which I've seen. Yep, seen that.
Okay. Well, it's kind of makes the same type of sound as a wing bone, but you put it on a lathe, a piece of wood on lathe, then you drill holes through it, and you form it, and you have a little mouthpiece that you stick in your mouth, and you a wing bone.
Yeah, it's essentially a mechanical version of a wing bone call.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And then the tube calls, they're interesting as well. I feel like they're kind of making a comeback a little bit right now.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, Mark Prudhomme with the KT team come out with a tube call, and he's just a phenomenal caller on a tube call, and everybody's like, "Man, I want to call like that on a tube call." And so tube calls got kind of popular after that.
What's the benefit to a tube call?
Just a different sound.
Okay.
It can get really loud if you want to strike a turkey, make them gobble. But yeah, it's just a different sound.
Different sounds, kind of like elk hunting. Everybody had, the hoochie mama, the little squeezing one, and then all the elk got used to it, and so they started switching up, and now people are switching sounds. Probably similar to that. Everybody's using the same turkey call for a while, and then somebody brings something back, and it's a new, different sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the tube call is something that you can actually gobble onto, and a lot of people, if they can't use a box call or don't have a box call, they can gobble on a tube call. So
interesting. Do you use your gobbling ability when you go out and pursue turkeys?
It's not the first thing I use. I mean, I don't just walk through the woods gobbling, but in certain scenarios, I absolutely use it, and it absolutely works. Not 100%, but I mean, it absolutely works.
What kind of scenario would that be?
A turkey with hens. If I can get in close to a turkey with hens, he's going to want to fight any intruder that comes by. So if I get close enough to him, I'll gobble at him, and he'll come marching in wanting to fight.
Guess I need to learn how to do that. Me and Kevin were talking before you hopped on about all the turkeys we've screwed up in the past 2 years and how we've lost toms with hens just going quiet, trying to go hard. But it's one thing I've never done is gobbled at them.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, Joe, what's your go-to when you've got a hung up bird? I mean, if you know they have hens, if you don't know if they have hens, what's your go-to tactic?
Yeah, I'll try different calls. A lot of times a specific call triggers something in the turkey. I believe that it may be a hen in the area, like a pot call might sound more like a hen that the gobbler knows or understands. And I believe they can understand the hens that they have their voices. And so when you trigger something that the gobbler knows, like if you're calling on a glass call, let's just say, and it sounds like one of the hens the gobbler knows, a lot of times that'll trigger him to actually come, or the trumpet, the different sound in the trumpet, the way it carries and the hollowness that it has to the sound. And I mean, just different things. So I'll usually try different things. And then, like I said, if I can get close and gobble at him, I'll do that. That'll be one of the other things I try. So
yeah, and then kind of going back to turkey call making and making mouth calls. I mean, how much of that has changed since you began? I mean, going from like a ghost cut to all the different types of calls.
Describe a
reads.
Ghost cut.
I'll let Joe describe that.
A ghost cut is, first of all, the mouth call, you have pieces of latex, and they're usually layered. And one of the very top reed sticks out over the second reed just a little bit, and the second reed sticks out over the third reed just a little bit. And so the cuts are usually on the very top reed just to get it to vibrate. And a ghost cut is like if you were to cut a V in the center of the top latex, and then you cut that little tongue piece out, so there's missing a piece of latex on the very top reed. That's what a ghost cut is.
Yeah, then you've got like the bat wing. I'm sure you've gotten to play with a bunch of different ones. How has that changed over the years from like, your beginning, and how have you kind of morphed it?
Well, to be honest with you, mouth calls change almost every year, even though it's the same cuts, like a V cut or a bat wing or a combo cut or a ghost cut or whatever. Because what happens is the materials change almost every year. So it's like if you have a specific stretch and latex and cuts, the sound will change if you've got a different piece of latex. So
interesting.
You almost got to redesign almost every year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Huh. Unless you buy a bunch of the material that'll last you for several years. A few years ago, some really, really good green .003 latex came out, and I bought thousands of that green latex. So I still have some because it was just phenomenal stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and talk a little bit too about how you build calls, because I know specifically I've tried different calls in the past. Then when I went to blowing your calls, I sounded a lot better. And we talked a little bit about that. And you said it was because a lot of the other calls are stretched too tight. And that makes a big difference.
Yeah, and a lot of it's the way people call, the way people learned how to call. And so in my call designs, I have some that are stretched really loose, some that are medium, and some that are stretched pretty high, depending on the caller's ability and what they're used to. I can usually tell them, which one's probably going to sound better of my calls. So.
Is there any common mistakes that folks use? I know the first time I threw a diaphragm in my mouth, luckily I had a little bit of experience with elk diaphragm, so I knew to have it not backwards. But other than that, what's the main mistakes that you see from new callers trying to produce that sound, blow in the air over the latex, and the tips that you would give somebody to at least start creating the correct sounds?
Well, first I would say listen to real turkeys and see what you're wanting to try to imitate. Because if you're just listening to other people call, you're just trying to imitate somebody else's call instead of an actual real turkey. And most of the time, people, when they first start, they're really, really loud. And they really push on the card real hard with the air flow, So I would say start off easy, learning how to blow, learning how to maneuver your tongue back and forth to get the sound that you want. And then you can go. I usually tell people that are just starting, you need to start with just a straight 2-reed call that doesn't have any cuts. If it has any cuts, it should have 1 or 2 cuts on the side, just on the edges of the call, just so you can learn how that's supposed to work. You get in the high pitched at the beginning and you drop your tongue and you get the rollover yelp sound. And so that's how I usually try to teach people how to learn. Once you get that mechanism down, then you can start going to a little bit harder calls, like cut calls with V cuts in it and calls with, bat wing cuts and all that kind of stuff, which makes it raspier. You can make it high pitch with a ghost cut. So there's different things, but starting off is easy 2-reed call, just be like an elk call. You start with a single reed elk call, you learn how to make the sound, and then you can go to different calls after that.
Yeah, you touched on something really important there, was listening to actual live turkeys. And something that I've noticed with you is you have live turkeys. How long have you had wild turkeys to just listen to in your yard there?
Since 1994.
That's awesome.
You just get to sit out and listen to them, and then figure out what makes the best realistic sound.
No, he's got birds that what subspecies are those?
Some of them I don't even know. I just got them from friends, but some of them were Rios.
Yeah.
I actually got on. I think it's McMurray. This was 15 years ago or more, something like that. And McMurray's hatchery sold Rio Grande chicks 1 day old. So I bought a dozen of them or whatever. Anyway, but yeah. The very first ones that I had was in 1994. I turkey hunted in Redding, had a friend up there, and he had some turkeys. I don't know what they were or what kind, or if they were just yard birds or whatever. But anyway, he had them in a pen. Well, the day before I got there was a big gobbler fight, and they broke through the gate and the fence, and they busted the nest up, busted the hens off the nest and everything. And they were all broke. All the eggs were broke except for 2. And he goes, if you want to take those 2 and see if you can incubate them, here you go. So I took them home. Put them in an incubator, and 28 days later, I got 2 birds hatched.
No way.
One was a gobbler, one was a hen. And as a Jake and a Jenny, they bred, and she had 12 eggs and hatched all 12.
Wow.
No way. He was actually able to breed her as a Jake.
Absolutely. So those people that say Jake can't breed, I beg to differ.
Interesting. Yeah, a lot of the research out there says that that Jakes are in the wild, at least, are not able to breed the hens. But interesting. That says something a little different.
Yeah, the Jake and the Jenny, and she had a nest. I let her nest, and since then I take the eggs away from them because they'll break them and step on them if they're in a pen and there's a bunch of other birds in there. But yeah, I had a little cab over camper that I had sitting off to the side that I didn't have it on, and she got underneath the little ledge and was underneath that little camper shell, and that's where she nested. She hatched all 12 eggs.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
How much of a game changer is that for you, having live birds to listen to all the time?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Because I'm not trying to imitate any person that's trying to kill a turkey. I'm trying to imitate the bird that's standing right there beside me. I've heard stuff that 99.9% of the people has never heard, or seen or videoed. I took a video of a hen one time standing outside my pen. She had her head tilted. She was looking up in the air and making this funny sound that was like, what are you doing? And I looked up, and there was a hawk flying over. and she was making a specific sound of that hawk flying over to let all the other turkeys know that, there's a predator out there. Be careful.
That's awesome. You hear that, Carson? Start building the aviary.
I
It's
was
time.
going to say, think about how much vocalization that they have that we don't understand and just try to mimic, and like you might be saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, and
I'm sure I do it all the time.
that's wild.
Yeah, all the soft stuff that most people, especially hunters, never get to hear because you don't get that close to turkeys. I'm face to face with these birds, and I can hear things like, "Wow, listen to that," And it's funny. I mean, like a lot of people can't even hear a turkey spitting drum,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like I've got my ears tuned to it now, so I can hear it a couple hundred yards away, easy.
That's impressive because I've turkey hunted for the past 8 years, and it took me up until like 3 years ago where I could really lock in, and if I hear that spitting drumming, I'm like, I know what that is. For the first 4 years, I thought people were just making it up. I'm like, I don't know what you guys are hearing. Like it's a trained ear kind of thing.
It's one of the
absolutely trained ear. Yep,
and it's one of the best sounds you can have in the woods, man.
I was actually had the birds that I was raising for over a year before I trained my ears. I'm like, I couldn't hear it at all. My buddy was saying, "Can't you hear him spitting and drumming?" Every once in a while I hear a sound or whatever, but no, I don't hear anything. And then you don't hear that little thing. It sounds like a car engine revving. And I'm like, yeah, I hear that. He said, "That's the drum."
Yeah.
I'm like, really? So I don't know if you just heard that, but a turkey just gobbled outside.
Perfect. We'll have to get our audio engineer to boost that section up when he comes in and does it.
Yeah. What do you have coming up for this spring, Joe? Anywhere you're going? Any other state?
I'm going to Arkansas.
Oh man.
I have a buddy who's invited me up to come out and hunt. He's in a club in Montgomery Island on the Mississippi River, and it's in Arkansas. That turkey's gobbling like crazy right now.
That's awesome.
So,
have you seen them getting a little more fired up with the warmer weather we're having now?
yeah, I mean, I come back from Nashville. I got home at midnight Saturday night. I went to church Sunday morning, and on the way over there, I saw 3 different flocks, and all of them had three plus strutters in each flock.
Ooh.
So it's starting.
Yep, it's starting.
So going back when you're talking about, having hung up birds and using different calls, how many different types of calls are you bringing out in your vest when you go hunting?
Ooh, my vest is heavy.
I can attest to that. It looks heavy.
It looks like you're sticking bricks in there.
I have a slate call. I have a glass call. I have 2 different strikers. I have a box call. I have a trumpet. I have a tube call. And I have a whole pocket full of mouth calls.
So you're set for whatever. And a question off that.
And I have personnel, and I've got a bunch of other stuff too. But
how much does the material of the striker matter?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm, like I said, still learning this. So I've have a couple different ones, and I've heard them make different sounds, but I'm not at that level where I'm like, oh, I should use this striker in this situation.
Yeah. If you get a really good pot call, it doesn't matter what striker you use. Mm-hmm. They will have a little bit different sound, but sometimes you have to match strikers to the pot call.
Okay.
Just some strikers just don't sound very good on certain pot calls. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, you've got a bunch of different things. I've actually incorporated a few different things that I've seen in your vest. One being the tip of a wing. I've used that multiple times. I was just telling Carson how I used that this year to pretend to pick a fight with another hen and actually got a bird to gobble that was not gobbling previous to that. He didn't come in, but we at least got him to gobble. And it was always fun listening to your stories, and you go through your vest and see the different little things in there that all help. They all have their certain situation, right? Yep.
Yeah, I've actually called a bird in with just the wing.
Oh, really?
And I hunt with a buddy. Yeah, we roosted the turkeys the night before, and we heard 13 birds fly up. We couldn't see them, but we were about 150 yards from them, and I knew right where they were roosting, but we just couldn't see them because of the lay of the land. There were some trees in between. We couldn't see the trees they were actually flying into. So we went back the next morning. Didn't know if there was gobbler. There was no gobbling, no nothing. But I knew there was 13 turkeys. We counted every one of them. So we get in there, and I went out at pitch black dark. I went out where the turkeys could see. I put a decoy out where they could see it from the trees. And so we sat there and waited, and just, right before daylight, I mean, the sky's getting blue and the birds are starting to chirp. Two birds started gobbling about 500 yards to our right, just going crazy. And I'm like, I'm looking at him and he's looking at me, and I'm like, do we need to get up and go over there or what? I said, let's just sit here for a little bit. And we were probably 100 yards from the turkeys. And about that time, the other birds had gobbled maybe 20 times. And about that time I heard, I said, we're going to sit right here. And right about the time I figured it was about fly down time, I took that wing and I scratched it on the tree we were sitting on just a little bit. And I went, and I set it and I hit the ground with it. And when I looked up, the gobbler had flown down and lit right beside the decoy. And I told him, shoot. And he killed the turkey, and it had 1.5 inch spurs.
Oh, that's awesome.
He never gobbled one time in the tree. He had 12 hits.
That's incredible. Yeah, I've never called one in with just the wing. I've called two birds in just scratching though. That's huge. I
had a bird gobble at me. It was in Colorado, and this bird was going away gobbling. So I kept having to move, and he went up on top of this ridge, and it sounded like he didn't go over very far. So I snuck up to the top of this ridge, and I'm just getting over, and he gobbled, and he was just on the other side of the ridge, down over the ridge, So I get up there and I go to sit down, and I scooted my butt up against a tree, and it went, and he gobbled to it. I went, really? So I sat down, got my gun up, and I scratched in the leaves, and he gobbled again, and here come his tail. And he heard me sit down. He thought it was scratching.
That's awesome. Going back, I heard you talk about, you roosted 13 birds. If you're going hunting and say you didn't have a chance or you didn't roost any birds the night before, what's your go-to strategy to locate birds in the morning on a hunt that you don't have anything roosted the night before?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm hunting around here, most of the time I know where turkeys are going to roost. But if I'm somewhere else, different state, somewhere I've never been before, I want to get up on a ridge where I can hear real good, hear some different valleys from, different points of view, and listen. And then I like to wait for the birds to wake up. But if you're hunting back east, the owls will usually start. So I'll usually try to get an owl going. And if I can't get an owl, or if I can't get a bird gobble to my owl, if I get the owls going, a lot of times they'll strike a gobble out. And so that's usually how I try to get, find a bird in the morning that I haven't roosted.
Do you fancy yourself a river hunter in California? Are you going up in the woods or mountains or anywhere you can chase them?
Anywhere I can chase them. The place that I hunt, that I have a permission to hunt on some private property, it's at about 3,000 foot elevation, getting into the pines. There's some pines there. And then, we've hunted lakes and rivers and everywhere else we can find turkeys.
Yeah. They take you out to all kinds of different places.
Yep.
So, Joe, if somebody wants to find or buy one of your calls, how do they go about doing that?
They can get a hold of me. I'm on social media, Facebook, or I actually have a TikTok, but it's Jimmy Salton TikTok. I'm Jimmy Salt.
His alter ego.
Perfect. Well, we can tag you when we post this. Is it under your Facebook or the Motherlode Turkey Calls?
No, it's under Joe Slaton.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Joe, we appreciate you coming on Save for the Blind podcast. If you have anything else you want to leave us with, you're more than welcome to add it on. But other than that, we hope you have an awesome day.
No, I don't think so. Unless you guys want to hear a turkey gobble.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We need the gobble.
Yeah. Can you do that? That'd be sweet. What a perfect way to end it.
Absolutely.
Let me see. I hear somebody mowing the lawn or something. Here
I
he is.
just
I
heard.
heard
I
the
just heard
gobble
it in the
there.
background.
All right, listen.
Oh yeah.
It's time.
There you go.
That's awesome, Joe. Thank you very much, man. We really appreciate it.
Sure, no problem.
All right, Joe. Have a good rest of your day.
All right, talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Save It for the Blind podcast. You can find our podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.